This is the Atlanta Small Business Show with Jim Fitzpatrick.
Hello everyone, welcome into another edition of the Atlanta Small Business Show. I'm Jim Fitzpatrick. Today I'm so excited to have with us Mr. Ira Wolfe, who is the founder and president of Success Performance Solutions and best-selling author of Recruiting in the Age of Googlization. Welcome into the show, Ira.
Hey, thanks very much, Jim. I really appreciate the opportunity.
Sure. Googlization. That's, I love it.
You know, I came up with that. I just shared the story with somebody else. I came up with that about 11 years ago. My first book was Geeks, Geezers, and Googlization. And the Googlization came through almost just as an alliteration, with the geeks and the geezers, what can go with that. And we talked about Google and the future of technology. And I don't know where I came up with it, but it stuck with me. And now I'm the Chief Googlization Officer. So.
That's great. Well, we can all relate to that. That's for sure. So let's kind of dive right in here. You're an expert and you speak all over the country and obviously written a book and got a successful company that focuses and helps companies in the area of recruitment and retaining good people and such. From your perspective, what are the top 5 most common recruiting mistakes that you see people making or companies making?
Well, there's a lot, and obviously narrowing it down to 5. I think the number one mistake, and you and I were talking about it just a little bit before the show, people think that the challenge is local, it's regional, it's industry specific, and it's none of those. It really doesn't matter if you're small business, large business, if you're on the East Coast, West Coast, Middle America, every industry, almost every industry is struggling with it. So that's the number one mistake. It's like, hey, we're all in this together. One of the other areas is really the lack of technology, the lack of metrics, and you don't have to be super sophisticated. We don't have to talk about using artificial intelligence, and you don't have to invest thousands and thousands of dollars in this. Sometimes it's just testing what you did, and if it's not working, stop it. But the number one biggest mistake that I see is in the job application. And again, this goes back to technology, but we are literally still using the same application that we used to hire people in 1970. And, we ask for name and address and city and state and the last 3 employers, last references. Yeah. And, and that was fine when people used to send it out. The job market was certainly different. It wasn't low unemployment like it is now. But one of the big areas is now, almost 90% of the population starts their job search on a mobile phone. It's a 3-inch screen or 3 to 5-inch screen sometimes. And people were going after young people, millennials, Generation Z, and even baby boomers. I mean, I live and die by my phone. And frankly, as if I was starting to search there, and I can't. One is read the application. I'm not going to download a PDF and fill it out and mail it in. So I think the application is huge. One of the other areas that you asked for 5, one of the other areas is candidate experience. Understand, and the application is part of that, user experience. Make sure that you put your stand in the shoes of the candidate. Fill out the application yourself, see what it's like, do it on a mobile phone, see if it's hard. And the other is employment branding. People pay attention to their resume. People have choices now. Almost everybody, I'm sure there's some good people out there that don't have jobs and are looking, but most people that are qualified have a job and they have choices. And if the first thing they do is go up to your website, or they go to Glassdoor or Kununu or Indeed, and they see that you have 2 stars because you don't treat people well, they're out of there.
What are some of those things that you recommend that you can do to change that reputation that's online that in some cases isn't representative of the true company?
Well, one is pay attention. Most small companies don't pay attention to the reviews. So we're not talking about gaming the system, but if you have good employees, pay attention to that. Even if you have only 2 reviews and one of them's bad, and it's a bad experience, respond to that. Pay attention to that, acknowledge that. People do it on Yelp. I mean, like restaurants and small businesses, if they're on Yelp, I remember talking about this 10 years ago, and people said, we're just small and we can't keep up with it. And people are always going to talk about bad experiences. How do we counteract that? It goes back to a really old customer service principle. If you don't respond at all, it's going to stay there. But some people are just looking that you acknowledge that you heard them. And by doing that, the complaint may not go away, but it's mitigated. And the more you do it, the more interaction, you can correct those things. So
walk us through REACH, is the acronym, and why it's important to consider in recruiting.
I tried to look at touchstones when people came through to help people. One is understand what the flow was. If somebody first saying, hey, I think I'd like to look for that company, or I went on Indeed or Glassdoor and found an ad, and then all the way to the end. So what REACH stands for is, one is, how do you reach the right audience? And is it social media? Is it a job board? What's the messaging? How can we improve that? Then once they're there, and that, just like that first impression is we make an impression of somebody else in 3 to 10 seconds, depending on who you read, is how do you engage them? So once they land there, you have to have a positive impression. So that's the E, is engage. A is the application process, as I mentioned earlier, needs to be completely turned inside out. We recommend just a 4 or 5 question screening of only the critical questions. And believe it or not, you don't need somebody's name to qualify them. You need them to hire them, but you don't need their name and address.
So the name wouldn't be part of it.
The name biases people. There's a tremendous amount of unconscious bias.
Yeah.
Implicit bias in names.
Yeah, there is. Yeah.
So you don't need names, you don't need address, you don't need the city, you don't need that to qualify. You need to know, are you over 18 years old? Do you have reliable transportation? Do you have a 4-year degree? Are you licensed in the state of Georgia or Pennsylvania or Iowa, or wherever you are? You need those 4 or 5 questions. If they answer no to any of those questions, you don't need the rest of it. Save everybody a lot of time. So that's the application. The next one is a conversation. That went back to ghosting. As soon as they apply, have a conversation with them, engage them, let them know where they are in the process. If you can't get to their application in the first week, send them a short email, send them a text. Texting is also much bigger. 95% of people open a text within the first 3 seconds. Only 20% of emails ever get opened. Why aren't companies using more text? So the C is for conversation, communication, and then the H is hire. And we talked about that. That's that onboarding. Onboarding is part of the hiring process, part of the recruitment process. People hand it off, they give it to the job, they basically get the job offer signed, and then they hand everything off to the hiring manager or someone else. It should be part of the recruitment to ensure that the person that they selected actually has a good first few weeks on the job. And has that smooth transition. So reach, engage, apply, conversation or communication, and hire.
Makes perfect sense. It really does. And the last one specifically, sometimes people will go into a company and they're just, nobody really takes ownership of them in those first couple of weeks, right? And it's a hand-holding process for, in many cases.
Onboarding. Onboarding is the next stage. People are struggling to find people. Onboarding is part of people's recruitment effort.
Right.
Onboarding is really challenging in a small company.
It is.
And one of the things now, and we're starting to, it's not an area that I was involved with before, but now we're highly recommending it. A lot of the training and a lot of the things can be done through, it doesn't have to be a formal LMS, a learning management system, but even create a short video. I mean, videos are really inexpensive. Prop up an iPad, introduce or an iPhone, do a little selfie. You're the manager, welcome that new employee there. If there's things that they're supposed to do, just record it. Again, it's free. Somebody has a smartphone in the company. Just record a short message. Here's what we need to do. And then there's a lot of really affordable training programs. So if they have to learn how to do something, it's, unless it's a very unique process, offer it to them. Again, if cheapest LMS in the world is YouTube, how do I do this? Just send people up there and have them learn how to do it.
Describe for us the differences from your perspective between generations in regard to workplace culture.
There's a lot of similarities. We're all people. One of the things that there are some differences because of time. When you talk to someone who was born, Generation Z or even millennials, born 1980 and after, Gen Z's pretty much 2000 and after, they don't understand certain things. I'm still excited. I've got a reunion coming up. We're talking about the landing on the moon and Woodstock. That's history to them. They have no, other than singing in the movie and maybe hearing some of their parents' music, they have no clue what that is. I think you have to put yourself in the shoes of that generation. And it's not that they're bad, but they never knew a world that it took time to get things, that you got today's news tomorrow on a newspaper. Now it comes through on a tweet. So there's just a different perspective. Also, this is a funny story, and if anybody goes to YouTube or has seen me present, they'll hear this over and over again. The May 1968 cover of Life magazine talked about a generation that was promiscuous, idealistic, narcissistic, lazy. Guess whose generation that was? That's right. Every generation, and there was a really good piece by Jason. He interviewed me for the piece. It was Jason Pfeiffer for Entrepreneur magazine. You can go up and look at it. And it was about the history of young generations, the next generation. And it goes back to very early times. I mean, we're talking like early, maybe even BC, but certainly early centuries with Chaucer and Shakespeare. And every generation complained about the next generation. So I think simple principle, and when we're talking about generations, one is understand there are differences. Most of them are somewhat cultural, age-related, the generation they grew up in, but they're still people.
Well, I want to thank you very much, Ira, for joining us on the Atlanta Small Business Show. It's been very enlightening. We would love to have you back on to talk more about these issues of recruitment and maybe next time we'll talk about how to keep the people once you get them in your employment, right?
That's the key. I mean,
that is the key.
People stuff enough. Losing them then is really it's very, very expensive.
That's right. But it's a real problem that's out there. That's for sure.
For sure, yeah. Absolutely. I appreciate the opportunity.
Yes.
Thank you.
Ira Wolfe, founder and president of Success Performance Solutions and best-selling author of Recruiting in the Age of Googlization. Check it out online. And again, thanks so much, Ira, for joining us.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for watching Atlanta Small Business Show. ASBN is a part of the JBF Business Media family.